Hello, and thanks for tuning in to a new edition of True Audio Files. My name is Jim Carter. Before I get too into the video, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel, like this video if you liked it, and leave some comments below on what you feel about the video and what I have to say in here. So, this time around, doing a sound quality shootout. I recently got the Crosby, Stills, and Nash One Step by Mofi, and I am going to do a shootout with it and another copy of it that I have in my collection. So we'll get into that here. I basically have this copy here, which, yes, you could probably see it has a Goodwill sticker on it. As far as I can tell, going through Discogs, it definitely seems to be an early pressing, like maybe from '69. Hard to say for sure because I couldn't find an exact match, but the closest match I could find was dated from 1969. So it's a super early pressing, definitely before pre-1980, before they started putting barcodes on items. So I've got that one, and then I am going to also compare that to the One Step. I have number 766, as you could see here. Hopefully you could make that out. And yes, this one was taken from digital files. They did a copy of the master tapes in the highest quality sound they have available to them digitally, and then cut it to vinyl on super vinyl. And I wish I had the classic records version to be able to compare, because I'd really love to compare that to the One Step, but unfortunately I do not. But I've got, like I said, either a first or early pressing, so it's going to be as close as you can get to the master tape when it came out originally as you can get. So, did stuff a little bit differently this time around. Traditionally, for those of you who know me, when I do shootouts, I typically will I'll listen to if it's a One Step, I'll listen to the One Step all the way through, and then I will pick out songs that I think are going to be the best to do a demo against. This time I did it a little bit differently. I listened to the One Step all the way through, then I listened to the early pressing all the way through, and then I picked a couple songs to go with. So here's my take. The One Step definitely had deeper bass. I had originally put that it has more bass, but I'm not sure if it's got more. I think it's just got more deep bass. Because the original early pressing definitely has a decent amount of bass. It just doesn't seem to go as deep. And same with the highs. You know, there's definitely more highs on the One Step, and they go higher. And I think that's attributed to just traditionally what's done on records back in the late 60s and into the 70s and so on, where they wanted to try to make sure that when the record is played back, it doesn't have any issues being played back on less expensive turntables. As less expensive turntables, if you had a little too much bass or dynamics to it, it would tend to skip. For those of you who are in the know about this, the one notorious one for that was Led Zeppelin 2, where it was cut too hot and too much bass, too much punch, too much dynamic. So they had to recut it because it would skip on cheap turntables. So that's, what you get with the early pressing. But I felt, in terms of sound stage and the quality of sound was still pretty decent, and I would hope so, because it was basically cut from the master tape, and it should sound great, right? And it was an early, cut. So it was something that was done not too long after the master was made. So next up, I did the One Step, or I should say I should talk about the One Step. The One Step definitely had the clarity and was, it had a little bit of a wider sound stage too, which again can be attributed to, the choices made during the cutting. And just because it had the more treble and the more bass, I felt it definitely had the better clarity overall. But that also came at a price, which is very interesting on this one. And I looked at the credits, and I'll get into the credits part in a second. But the one thing that I noticed most about this, and it really only showed up when listening to it through the One Step was the backing vocals or the harmonies during choruses and things on that nature. Those seemed to be inconsistently recorded from track to track. One track they had a little bit too much mid-range, one track they seemed to be pretty good and even, and other times they just didn't sound as good as other tracks did overall, not necessarily just from an EQ perspective. But I really found that really odd, and the reason why I find that odd is when I looked at the credits for recording, it all seemed to be, or at least they claim everything was recorded in the same spot by the same people. So you would have thought that you'd have that consistency along the way. Now, when listening to the early pressing, it's really not obvious, and I think they did a better job in that respect for trying to maintain consistency of the sound on the record throughout. So, when you go from track to track, it's not as obvious on the early pressing that there were differences in sound quality on the recording of the harmonies. When you listen to the solo vocals, they were crisp and clear and sounded spectacular on the One Step. But the drawback is there was a huge difference in the sound quality in some cases between the harmony chorus vocals and the solo voices when you listen to it on the One Step. So it was kind of odd, but it was definitely a noticeable thing if you were to do an A-B comparison. And so, in one way, obviously the Crosby, Stills and Nash album is not an audiophile level recording. Still sounds good. Obviously the songs are spectacular. And overall, it's obvious to me, what with the One Step and with anything that Mofi typically does, their main goal, at least it appears to me, is to try to get as close to the sound of what was on that original master tape as possible. And maybe they do a little bit of EQing here and there, but it was obvious, especially with this record here, that that's their goal, is to just get as close to the original master tape as possible. Where in many cases when they're cutting a record, they will make a lot of changes like they did, I'm sure, with this early pressing, and in this particular case, to keep everything consistent sounding. Maybe to get rid of some tape hiss, because you definitely hear a little bit of tape hiss on this, although that can be contributed to just the number of times this master tape's been played back too. So, and in turn the age of it. So that's kind of my take. I would say that if you're looking for the best, getting most sound quality out of it, the One Step's definitely the way to go. It definitely, in most cases, sounds better than the original pressing I have. Again, I'd be very curious to hear what the Classic Records one sounds like, but One Step definitely sounds better, with some caveats because of the kind of the issues with the master recordings that were talked about with the chorus. So that's my take. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Please comment below if you'd like, and I hope you guys have a great week. And please follow me on social media. I've got the True Audiophiles page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as well. So that is everything I have for today. You folks have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.